I'm Kråkan, also known as Corvus Cornix, and welcome to Yacc, yet another Crowcast where I pick a game, I play it for a week, and then I'll talk about it. This week's game is Wacky Races. It was published in 1992, developed and published by Atlas for the NES, and also there will be spoilers up ahead, just so you know, but first a little backstory. So this game looked fun, and I hadn't played it before. That's the reason I played it, I guess. And I also remember watching this on Cartoon Network, the animated series. So the game starts out with a level select similar to Super Mario, like a overworld map. You have three choices. You can select Hip Hop, the A scenario, which has 3 courses. You can select Splish Splash, which is the B scenario and has 3 courses. And you can select the C scenario, which is Go Go America, and has 4 courses. So I selected the first alternative, Hip Hop. So you're introduced to a little cutscene where Dastardly or Dastardly, I don't know how to pronounce it. His plane has crashed while he was chasing the pigeon, and you, Muttley, the dog, needs to help him out, needs to save him basically. So the first level is a cabin area with trees and a hill in the background. You control the dog Muttley. You press the B button to bite and the A button to jump. You can take 3 hits before you fall off the screen. So you have some collectibles. You can collect bones, which cycle through the different abilities, which I will talk about in a second. And then you have the other collectibles, which are diamonds and 1-ups. And I think if you get enough diamonds, you automatically get a 1-up. So the ability system works like this. It cycles through it. When you pick up a bone, you cycle 1 square to the right. So the first space is basically bombs. So you can throw a bomb in an arc and it does damage. And the second ability is Bark, which is a projectile. It basically flunks the text over screen and hits enemies. I think it can pass through like solid objects. I can't remember, but then you had the flight ability, which is like the raccoon's tail in Super Mario Bros. 3. You kind of glide a little bit slower down to the ground, if that makes sense. And then you have the last one, which is the heart. And that automatically fills your life up to the max, and it adds 1 extra heart. I think you can have in total 6 hearts. And the enemies in the first level are jumping flowers, also spitting flowers, and bees, and giant white rabbits that jump, and snails. And this is just a thing with NES games in general. The animated series didn't have that many enemies, if none at all. So when you throw in like enemies, it's usually like generic animals like bats and birds and whatnot. So I don't know, it's just a thing they did back in the day. And at the end of the level, I fell down a crypt or like a dungeon, like a cellar perhaps. And the enemies down here are knights in armor and knights like the chess pieces. But you also have like bats, spoilers I guess. And I found a thing about this stage that is very hard to know what's solid platforms and not. You know, some pillars you can walk by where others are solid, and yeah, so on. And the first boss is a guy in a car that jumps around across the screen. I found out that this was very frustrating right to begin with, but at this point you are pretty much powered up and you got enough bones to, you know, basically have all the abilities. So the first strategy here is just to stand in the middle and avoid his balloon projectiles. And then there's also like every boss has like a second stage, so when you learn the first pattern you go on to the next pattern and so on. So the level after this is the desert, and here you have enemies like piranha plants, hermit crabs, and fire with eyes. And there's also this mechanic that I don't like. It's also like in Super Mario Bros. 3, you have quicksand. So if you fall into a quicksand, you just jump to get out of it. At the end of the stage, you enter like a pyramid and you fight pharaoh's heads. And there are also like weights that fall down from the ceiling. And the boss guy on this stage is a guy in a tank. And this is the really frustrating part because you have to jump like all the time because you're in the quicksand. So this boss drags on because he takes a lot of hit. I think it's actually 2 guys in the tank, but yeah, anyway, so it drags on a bit and you have to learn the patterns and whatnot. That's the only problem. The levels are actually kind of easy to traverse through. There's some platforming involved, but the bosses are like sponges and you have to learn the patterns. So I had a lot of problems with the bosses, so to say the least. So the third level is like a plain, like a field where you fight gorillas, big-headed birds, and white hedgehogs. I don't know, it's it's a weird one. You enter a wooden area where you fight derpy owls, and and there's like a little short pyramid section. I don't know why. And then you fight the boss of this level, which is a guy with a lumberjack shirt in a car. And the trick to this boss is just to duck down in like ditches, so he drives over you, and then you can shoot him with bombs or other projectile, the bark, I guess. So that's the end of the first segment, and then you move on to the B segment, and you have a little cutscene where Muttley saves Dastardly, only to be yelled at, and he gets told you don't get any dinner before you catch the pigeon. And then you move on to Splish Splash, where Dastardly's machine breaks down, and you're forced to get a new engine for him. And the first level is a tropical island with frogs, bugs, moles, pink bunnies with boxing gear. And the next stage is a long bridge with some red squids and birds and killer whales that jump out of the water. And the boss guy on this stage is a guy in a race car, and he's like, you basically fight him in like a construction site area. So the second stage is an underwater stage where I think it's kind of funny because Muttley looks cute and derpy at the same time. He has this kind of cute doggy pedal when he swims. There's like a sunken ship segment, and then you have the boss, which is basically like a boat/plane. Real confusing. But this is where I hit a real brick wall and I couldn't even finish the game. Just as I said before, the stages and levels are fine, but when you hit the bosses and you don't know the patterns or anything, I couldn't finish it. I was like, I had no lives left, and I was tired of doing save states to just make a little progress each time. So I'm just gonna summarize the rest of the game real short. There's like a city area, there's a canyon, and there's like a rock level, and then you beat the game. And the last boss is like a caveman in a stone car, like the Flintstones, only they're like more hairier, if that makes sense. So you get a cutscene at the end of the game where Muttley and Dastardly are captured by the Desperados, I think they're called, and they basically lose the race. And then there is some end credits where Dastardly drive his car and he crashes into like something, and Muttley just laugh, and that's pretty much the end of the game. So gameplay: traverse the levels, beat all the bosses, and save Dastardly in the end. Or not. Control: the A button makes you jump, the B button uses the current ability, the D-pad moves the character around, the start button pauses, and the select button basically activates the current ability that you have selected via the bones. Graphics: nothing to write home about. The color palette's kind of bland, but I got nothing more to say about it. It kind of looks washed out, all the colors and everything. Sound and music: Hidehito Akoi made the music for this game, and it's also nothing to write home about. There's nothing hummable about the soundtrack once you turn off the game, and it doesn't really have much to do with the animated series cartoon soundtrack. Easter eggs, secrets, and glitches. At the start screen, you can punch in a code to basically get a boss rush mode. So if this game wasn't hard enough, you have to beat all the bosses, and once you beat the last caveman in the stone car, it loops back to the beginning. So I don't know, there's no point to this mode other than frustration. I don't know why. In conclusion, I wrote, yes, at least try this game. It's an okay platformer, and every stage introduces a new enemy sprite. So for some reason there are 3 different bat sprites, but they only needed 1, but they could make 3, so they made 3. What I don't like about this game are the bosses and their patterns, because the platforming segments before the bosses are just fine, relatively easy, but once you hit a boss, you don't know the pattern, and they're bullet sponges and they take forever to learn. So that's the only thing I can complain about the game. Otherwise, it's an okay game. A little washed out color palette maybe, but that's about it. So anyway, thanks for listening and watching, and take care.